Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dream Team web series. Today's segment is about working in virtual teams, and I'm super excited to introduce Lisette Sutherland. She is really cool to talk to, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with her. She is currently the director of Collaboration Superstars, a company that helps people work together from anywhere through online and in-person workshops. She also produces a weekly podcast featuring interviews with remote working experts highlighting the challenges and successes of working with virtual teams. So I think if you're really into this and you're into the process of building your virtual teams, definitely check out the podcast. So hi, how are you?
Hello and thanks. Yeah, definitely check out the podcast if you're interested in virtual teams. It's all people on the ground who are making it work.
Perfect. And I just think it's so fitting with what we're doing today, because I just think anyone that's really interested in this topic would definitely want to check that out. So now that we're talking about virtual teams and all of that, do you want to share something about yourself, like maybe how you got into becoming experts on virtual teams?
So about 10 years ago, I was working for a company in Los Angeles, actually, that was building an online project management tool, which is very common now, but back in the day it was very uncommon. But the reason, what was so cool about it was the reason that this tool was being built. And it was because the CEO didn't want to die. And so he decided what he was going to do is get longevity scientists from all over the world to use his tool, collaborate online, share data, and solve the problem of aging. So he just thought all of these people are working all over the world in different places, but they're not talking to each other. So he wanted them to collaborate online so that he wouldn't have to die. And that for me, I mean, I wasn't so into the cryonics or longevity movement at the time, but that for me was an aha moment of, oh my gosh, think of what we could do if we got the right people working together, no matter where they are. Think of the brain power that we could get. And down the rabbit hole I went. And I just started talking to companies who were doing it just to see what they were doing that was so successful. And then I just kept going, and I ended up building my company around all of these tips and tools.
Oh my God, that's so amazing. I just always think it's really cool when people they get that aha moment. They're like, whoa, they see an opportunity and just go with it. And it's just like something that melts with them and they become passionate. It's all about, that's what entrepreneurship is about. And I love that that's how you got into it. So what is the right time for an entrepreneur to start a virtual team, do you think?
So there's a bunch of different answers to this question. So a lot of people say, hey, if you're in a startup and in the beginning phase, when you really need that quick back and forth, you need people to be in the same room together. You all need to be, in the same room, brainstorming, throwing sticky notes everywhere, having ideas. And then later when things are running, then go virtual. But I say it just depends on the team. It depends on the team and what you need. Mm-hmm. But what I think is the most important for companies is, regardless of whether you're going to have remote workers or even allow flexible working, you should put the processes in place to be able to work remotely just in case something happens. So they call this being remote first. So that means that if there's a transportation strike, or if there's bad weather, or if your kids are sick at home, or the plumber's coming sometime between 9 and 5 p.m., that your business doesn't have to stop or suffer because somebody on your team is missing. So if you have those processes in place, and you're talking about your communication, and you're talking about where the files are and where people can access things, your business will only be stronger for it in the end. So when's the right time? I'd say as soon as possible, because just going through the process is going to help the company, even if you decide not to allow remote workers in the end.
Yeah, I always hear the problem where people are just like, I feel like every time I'm in movement, I'm on that hamster wheel with my business. Once I stop, everything else stops, because there's no processes, systems, or even people to help, right?
Right.
And that you want to avoid that. So you want to set up these processes and systems and have things in place where you can access all the information just in case something does falter, someone doesn't show up, and that makes such sense.
Yeah, because stuff happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So weird stuff happens that you cannot plan for, and that's when you want your processes in place, because it will happen. It's just a matter of when.
Yes, because entrepreneurship, as we all know, is uncertainty and unpredictable, and things just happen.
Yeah, exactly. The roller coaster ride is,
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like too, sometimes entrepreneurs are hard, like, they find it difficult to delegate, and that's like a barrier for them to want to expand or use virtual teams, because they're like, they're so far, I have to super explain things, this is time consuming. So what would you say to someone who had all those negative points?
Well, first of all, make sure you're hiring the very best. Don't just go and hire somebody who's good enough. Like, don't just hire 3 mediocre people who you think can get the job done. Wait and hire the top class A person that you possibly can. And with a remote employee, that's especially important. And there's all kinds of tips and tricks that I could give you for hiring remote employees. But I think one of the most common ones is use a variety of mediums to interview and talk with your remote employees. So like use instant messaging to make sure that they know how to use instant messaging, because a lot of your communication is going to be written. So you want to make sure that they know how to use some sort of a group instant message tool like Slack or Stride or some of the others. Interview them via video. This is super important because when you see their work environment, you can see how professional they actually are. So I've interviewed people that had screaming children running through the background, and the husband's cooking dinner, and the TV is on, and it's a job interview. And so you already know that they don't have the right place in order to be a successful remote worker. I mean, maybe that's fine in their environment, but if you're going to work on a team, you need a different sort of set of rules. So those are kind of a couple of tips. It's like interview using a variety of mediums, and do not settle. Do not settle.
And do you think, I just think it's funny, you're like, someone has their kids in the background. I think that goes into mindsets as well, which is like heavily what I've been really focused on lately. I think when you're going into an interview, you have to have that mindset, like, hey, this needs to be professional. Once you see that someone isn't even professional in the interview process, like, okay, that's probably not the right fit for me. If this is the type of this is how I want people to view my company, their representation of me. So I think too, that's what scares a lot of entrepreneurs. Like, this person is not in the work environment, right? But they should have the same feel of the company. How would you go about the managing styles, how you portray the company, what the company, like, you want everything to kind of synchronize together and be streamlined.
For sure. So then there's some really good tips for that. So the first thing I would say is, in your company, when you've got your people, remote or not, but especially when you're remote, what I recommend to all companies is create a team agreement. And this outlines your ways of working. So what kind of information do you need to share, and where is it stored? Do you need a shared calendar? Is there a task manager that you all are using and need to know how to use? How are you going to communicate with each other? Is it going to be instant messaging? Is it going to be email? Is it going to be video calls, phone calls? Like, what is your primary way of talking to each other? And then the last one is, how do you know what each other are doing? How do you know what are you guys working on? How are you going to collaborate together? And I always say, put this agreement into place, and it's just sort of outlines your ways of working, and it takes away a lot of misunderstandings. So a lot of that basic stuff that there's going to be a lot of conflict anyway, but get the basics out of the way, and you can do that with a team agreement.
Yeah, now with a team, easier too, right? It just makes the collaboration just.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because you got the basics out of the way, and when somebody new comes on your team, you show them the team agreement. They have an immediate glimpse of how people are working and what's expected of them. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say in terms, like, definitely have a team agreement in place. For in the office, you can see each other, you kind of know what each other are doing, but when you're remote, these things need to be explicitly outlined. Now, your team agreement is going to change over time as you discover new tools, as people come and leave the team. So I also recommend, this is not a manual, this is a living document. So every 3 months on every team that I'm on, we update our team agreement. We just go through it and make sure that everything's still current. And so that's what I mean by living document. So create it and then review it regularly.
Yeah, make sure.
So that's like step number 1. Sorry?
No, just to make sure that it continues to be relevant.
Yeah, exactly, because the last thing you want is something that doesn't reflect how the team is working. That's just a useless document at that. So it's and also it's a good reminder for the team, like, oh yeah, we agreed to update our I done this list, and I never do that, and oh yeah, okay. And then also, when there's conflict on the team, you don't have to go directly to the person and say, hey, you're not doing what you agreed. You can point to the team agreement and say, hey, we've agreed as a team that this is going to be our behavior. Do we need to change the agreement, or do we need to change our behavior?
Yeah.
So, it makes it's less confronting, and it gives you something to talk around as a team. So that would be step number one, I would say. And then the next step is for entrepreneurs is make communicating easy with each other. Make it super easy to talk to each other. So the first steps with that is, one, have a great internet connection. And I know it sounds really simple, but it depends on where your teams are in the world, or maybe where you are in your area, but internet connection is bad, and a lot of people kind of skimp. They get like the basic plan. But if you're going to be a remote company, no basic plans allowed. Like, you need full speed, high bandwidth, reliable internet. So that's the basic one. I won't go too on about that. But the reason you need it is because you also need turn your videos on. Mm-hmm. So this is where a lot of people go wrong. 5-10 years ago, we were all leaning over the conference room table going, hey, Bob, it's Lisette. Can you hear me now? Like, talking over those spider phones. Like, those are a thing of the past. Chuck them in the river. Like, I know they've gotten better, but they are still a thing of the past. Chuck those in the river. What we want now is video communication. That is the way of the future. And I want to show you an example of how important I think video communication is. And I'll share my screen really quickly. For anybody who does any sort of online presentations, this is what I'd like to show you. So you can see right now, this is like a Vanna White version. This is just a special camera that's on the back of my laptop that projects me onto whatever it is on my screen. So if you're giving a training or a presentation online or a webinar, this is the kind of thing that you want. And you can see it's a bit grainy and choppy. It's still in the early days, but it's way better than nothing. So for example,
that's amazing.
It's too. So like, if I hide myself, you can immediately feel a drop in engagement, right? Like right now, it's just a screen and a voice. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I put myself back on the screen, it's really, it's much more engaging. You can totally, it's just better. We're programmed as humans to communicate with each other via video. And so this is one of those ways, and why it's so important.
It feels more.
And then the other thing that
too, like, it feels like I could be at a seminar and you're standing in front of me doing the presentation. It's pretty
totally
cool.
Because there's a connection there, a visual connection that people really want to see. So video, people always say like, oh yeah, we can always do it without it. But I say, nope, you can't. There's too much information that you're missing by losing one of your senses, and that is sight. So make communicating easy is great internet, turn your videos on, and then have great equipment. So get yourself a noise canceling headset. Make sure you've got a quiet environment. I mean, the barking dog and the chirping bird, they're really cute at first, but they really get in the way of a productive conversation after a while. What we're trying to do is simulate what it's like to talk to somebody right next to you. Or if you're a total geek, as I am about to identify myself as, is you want it to be like Star Trek. You want it to like click on the communicator and be like Picard to Riker, and then Riker responds. Mm-hmm. So this is the kind of interaction that we're trying to create online. And with the technology in the last 5 years, it is 100% possible to be able to do that now.
Yes, that's what I was going to mention. When you're person to person and person work environment, you have that immediate direct communication. And I feel like people lose that when you're in virtual, because you're like, oh, and I have to text, or I have to email, or I have to maybe video, and they might not be accessible because they're not there in the office. So that human connection, like you mentioned, the site, just having that immediate response, that does get lost. It does get lost when you're working remotely. So it makes total sense to make sure that you're updating your equipment, that you're holding your employees accountable and responsible, maybe if you're using a task management tool. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and I'd like to give one more example, because you just brought up a really good point, which is a lot of times when we're in remote teams, we have to schedule a time to talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to have to do that. So I want to show off one more tool, and this is called a virtual office. There's several competitors, but this is my favorite. It's called Sukoko. And what you're seeing basically is a floor plan, and we're looking down into the office of somebody's office, and all these little dots that you're seeing here, they represent people in the office. So you can see where everybody is on the virtual floor plan, and you can move yourself to an office, one office to another, just by double clicking on the office. And you can only see and hear the people that are in the office with you. And I mean see, like, share video. And otherwise you just know where they are. So it's tools like this that really bring us closer together, because now you're not guessing what's going on and what people are doing or where they are if they're available. You're a virtual door knock away from your entire team. So this is what I mean by how we can simulate the office online. We can literally simulate the office online.
I know, that is so fantastic. I love that. Oh my goodness, virtual door knock away. And I also really like that phrase too. Do you find there's a difference in management skills when you're doing virtual versus in office?
So there is a difference in management style, and with the way I feel it needs to be updated is the old style is the old top-down command and control style of, okay, now you're going to follow this direction, you're going to do as I say. The new style is, I call it more leadership style, which means I, as a manager, am going to create an environment where my people can do their best work, and my job is to take the impediments out of their way. So I'm just trying to get the roadblocks out of the way, but it's a more autonomous style. So the teams are more self-organized, and they're more autonomous. And remote, it's sort of it leads to that anyway. It's sort of a natural, they have to be more autonomous because they're working in different places. So you're by nature are autonomous.
Yeah.
You need to change the leadership style in order to match the work style. So that means you cannot do top-down command and control any longer. It really does have to be a flatter management style and a flatter hierarchy. Now, there's some great resources out there on this, and I would direct people to the management30.com website. So Management 3.0 is a new modern management style, not just for remote teams, but for any team that wants to become more autonomous and more agile. So that's definitely a great resource for that.
Oh, that's amazing. And I also think too, when you mentioned the old versus the new, I think with the new leadership skills, there's more like you have to trust your employees, which makes sense that you say you have to really make sure that you're hiring the correct individuals, that they're actually competent, that they're fit for the role, and they're the right fit for the work environment too, and they're up for the task.
For sure, and I would say along with that, so definitely trust your employees. That's very hard to do, but let them show their reliability. So it goes both ways. So trust on a remote team is built through being reliable, consistent, and responsive. So it's like, are you doing what you say you're going to do? Do you do work that's of high quality? And can I find you if I need to? That's like the biggest thing that builds trust. And then the other thing I would add to that is caring. Do we show caring for each other? A manager who genuinely shows that they care about their employees, you ask how they're doing, show yourself, then you'll go a long way. If your employee thinks that you've got their back, they will go a long way for you.
They will go above and beyond most of the time.
Right.
Yeah. What advice would you give for communicating more effectively in this environment?
So if you've made communicating easy and you've got your team agreement in place, I'd say the advice that I give is put regular feedback loops in place so that, for instance, you're doing a team retrospective once every 2 weeks at least. And that's not, that's like how you're doing as a team. As a manager, I would also add in one-on-ones, like those old-fashioned one-on-ones. You can do them virtually just as, you can have a virtual coffee just as well as you can have an in real-life coffee. And then there's also a technique that I learned from Management 3.0 that's worked really well on a team, which is 360-degree team feedback. And Management 3.0 calls it merit money. It has nothing to do with money, though. What it really is every month, everybody on the team gets 100 points. And the idea is you can give those to anybody that you want on the team for any reason that you want. So it'd be like, okay, 20 points to Natasha for making me laugh and doing a great interview. And 10 points to Jen for arranging the meetup for me when I went to London, and whatever it is. And the idea is you learn what your colleagues like about working with you doing this. One example I can give is I work with the European team as an American, and I'm super enthusiastic, which for most Europeans comes across as fake, but it's actually a natural part of my personality. And so I was toning it down for a long time, trying to keep it a bit under control, until I learned from my colleagues that actually my enthusiasm was what they actually liked about me. So it was nice to hear through the merit money system that they liked that, because I didn't have to keep it so in check. I could feel a bit freer with my enthusiasm. So these are the kind of things that you learn. So that's definitely my advice. Feedback loops, you always learn something. And if you don't do them, you can get pretty far astray pretty quickly, because conflict builds in the weirdest of ways on remote teams. And you need times and places to release that steam. So
I was just trying to think what you were just saying. Kind of got lost in it after a little bit. But yeah, I kind of think in regards to communicating effectively, the feedback loop is 100%, because knowledge is power, and that's the only way you grow. And you, like you said, sometimes your differences you think you should hold back, but sometimes those are what excel you, because people actually love that about you, what makes you different or what makes you stand out. So I think that was really good for you to point out. What is the number one advice you would give to any entrepreneur building a business to execute their vision?
What I did when I built my business, one is surround yourself with as many mentors as you can find, for sure. And then the other thing that I did that was invaluable is I listened to the Entrepreneur on Fire podcast. And I mean, that is John Lee Dumas interviews one entrepreneur per day, every single day. And so if you're, if you want, you can listen to hundreds, thousands. He's got thousands, I think 2,000 interviews now. You can listen to 2,000 entrepreneurs tell their story of how they failed and how they succeeded. And that was awesome advice for building a business. Because through those 1,000 interviews or stories, you'll hear everything. And one of your circumstance will definitely match one of theirs. So don't do it alone. Get advice from everywhere.
Yes. If you think you can succeed on your own, you're probably just setting yourself up for failure at the end of the day.
Plus, it's way more fun to succeed with a community of people around you. That's way better.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so cool about what I'm trying to create with the Dream Team, because I think sharing a resource like that, like a podcast, tips and worksheets, and just having it all on one platform really does help an individual really try to hone in on what they need help on and excel. And I think it's amazing that today you're offering the online meeting tips, which is to host online meetings like a pro. So do you want to explain that a little bit more in depth for the audience?
Yes. So most people hate online meetings for good reason, right? The technology never works and you can't hear people, and most people don't have the videos on. But because you're all going to be turning your videos on, I thought my gift would be, I've created this set of cards to help people with visual clues. And for instance, when people talk but they're on mute, you want to be able to tell them really quickly. So I have this card you're on mute. Or maybe people are frozen but they don't know it, so you can tell them that you're frozen. And my favorite online meeting tip, which is actually great for co-located too, is there's always that one person in the meeting that goes on and on and on. Now there's a card for those people. It's the Elmo card, and it stands for Enough, Let's Move On. So when somebody just starts going off on a tangent, you just raise your Elmo card, because it's hard to verbally interrupt sometimes. You can always visually interrupt. So I've taken, it's a whole deck of cards actually that I've gotten, and there's a whole deck, but I've taken the 8 most popular ones and I've put them into a PDF that people can print and use on their own. So along with your 36 great tips for online meetings, you get a set of your own super cards to rock your own online meetings.
I love that. And I think that's really cool, because as we said, the human interaction and the visualizations are always key when you're communicating, especially in person. That's how you get cues from people, right? And when you can step in, when you can just how to communicate more effectively with them. So that is really cool. Thank you for sharing those cards. I love it. For more information about Lisette, visit her website. It's going to be in the video link and then also on the page. So please do not hesitate. And she's also launching she has a book, a new release coming up soon, and we'll hopefully have more information on that at a later date. So please, please, please keep in touch and just keep on visiting her site. And thank you, Lisette, for all the advice and information. You're just super smart, and I'm just so happy you're here today.
Well, thanks. And I really appreciate your web series. I think it's totally awesome.
Thank you. So everyone, you are the only one who can create your vision to be successful. So why not and do that today? Have a good one, and I hope you enjoyed this interview.